TYTD.
New York Ninja is a film that I've been meaning to cover on the channel pretty much since its release back in 2021. I initially picked it up pretty much as soon as it was available to purchase, but life or one thing and another got in the way and it just kept getting pushed back further and further. Well, today's the day, and man has this thing got a history. So for those of you who maybe missed the significant news about New York Ninja, it's a restored, unfinished film. Basically, John Liu, who you may remember from our previous season as he was in The Dragon the Hero amongst many, many other martial arts movies, was brought in by a film studio called 21st Century Distribution Corporation to write and direct a New York-centric action martial arts movie with a distinct Western influence for distribution in late 1984, early 1985. John agreed, and about 90 to 95% of the movie was shot. Seemingly, only the grander effects shots and some of the third act was left unfilmed. Then, the plug was pulled due to the money running out, meaning that there was no budget to finish filming or to do post-production anymore. The film sat with 21st Century for a couple of years untouched until the company fell into bankruptcy and its assets were liquidated and sold to a private buyer. Then, at some point in the early 2010s, Vinegar Syndrome purchased this buyer's collection as a bulk acquisition and had been slowly working through the haul until in 2018, when freelancer turned full-time employee Curtis Spieler was hired into Vinegar Syndrome and, while being given a tour on his first day, he spotted the New York Ninja cans labelled up on a shelf and was told about its history. He became fascinated by what could be on these reels, and started gently nagging his team to let him crack them open to see what was on them. And, eventually, at some point in mid to late 2018, they let him. And what he found was rushes. Can after can after can of raw footage shot 34 years prior in relatively pristine condition. But there was a problem. As anyone who's ever made a movie can tell you, you don't shoot your movie in order. You shoot to optimise location space, cast availability, budgetary needs. You shoot out a sequence and then stitch it back together in the edit. With these being rushes, none of the footage was in order and there were multiple takes of the same scene. So, at that point there was no way to tell exactly what scenes went where or whether the footage was even intended for the final film, or if it had maybe been shot as a promotional piece or a now deleted from the script sequence. Broadly speaking, this wouldn't be a problem. 99% of films are usually backed up with a fairly robust paper trail, scripts, storyboards, camera logs, production journals. These things help keep the film on track and help dictate how the film takes shape. All of that had been lost over the years, so they had no idea what was supposed to go where or even a basic running order. Oh, and to make things even harder still, all the footage was shot using a separate second sound unit. That means that the audio was recorded separately to the visuals, and the idea was to marry the two up in post. None of the original sound recordings survived. Essentially, it was mute, out of order, raw footage. Hours of the stuff, complete with outtakes. For most people, getting anything out of this footage would have been a Herculean effort that many would have just said wasn't worth it. But not Curtis. He saw potential in this thing, and he decided that he was absolutely the right person to take this one on. So, after twisting Vinegar Syndrome's arm with a damn good pitch, they gave him a budget and allowed the rushes to be HD scanned. New York Ninja was going to live again, and what followed was an intense 18 to 24 month journey. The cans were scanned, Curtis went through every single reel using a digital editor and separated the good takes from the outtakes, grouping together footage as he went into logical bins. He began assembling basic sequences using the footage, and quite quickly a basic story appeared. Using these sequences as inspiration, Curtis wrote an entirely new script, lip-reading chunks where he could to get an idea of the story being told, but otherwise writing whatever fit in about right and vaguely matched the mouth movements. New Foley and Atmos tracks had to be built to help recreate the bustling street noise, the sound of ships, the rustling of clothes, and an all-star cast of B-movie greats were brought in to re-record the new dialogue as VO overdubs, including the likes of Cynthia Rothrock and Don the Dragon Wilson. So, with it being 34 years in the making, does New York Ninja stick the landing? Well, given that the film was halted mid-production, the plot's a little up and down, but the key beats are fine enough. The film's set in the far-off future of 1984. Drug-addled punks roam the streets causing mayhem and carnage wherever they land. Crime is at an all-time high and young women are being abducted off the streets en masse with no clear intention. It's here that we meet our lead for the film, John. John's part of a journalist trio covering news in the New York area, and he's taken some time out to meet with his wife Nita, as it's her birthday. We join the pair as John presents her with a birthday present, a lovely piece of jewellery. Nita's delighted and tells John that she has a surprise for him too, but that she'll tell him later. John understands and promises her a nice birthday dinner, but as they're parting ways, Nita can't wait any longer and tells John that she's pregnant. John's absolutely delighted, as he always wanted to be a dad. With a pep in his step, he heads off back to work, but things are going to quickly turn sour. Nita starts heading back to her work, where she spots a group of men basically dragging a woman out of the subway and down a side street into a car. She spots that the woman being abducted has dropped her bag, so she picks it up and heads over to give it to her, and the gang spot that Nita's seen what they're up to, and without flinching, one of the gang grabs her and slits her throat, leaving her for dead at the foot of a subway staircase. News travels fast, and John's reporter friends Randy and Jack are with their boss when it lands. The three of them do a quick exposition dump establishing the murder and giving a bit of backstory to John and Nita's relationship. They all agree that they should go and see John as soon as possible to comfort him. Back at John's place, he's on the roof having already prepared a rooftop romantic dinner for the two. It's revealed that Nita had bought him some gifts. When the news hits of his wife's murder, he's so distraught he drop kicks the dining table into pieces and crushes the glass from a broken picture frame into his hands. Randy appears and tries to comfort him, but he just wants to be left alone. At an abandoned bit of scrubland, we're then introduced to our lead baddie for the film, dubbed by the press as the Plutonium Killer. He's introduced along with his chauffeur, Rat Tail, so called because he has a rat tail, mid-deal with a European-sounding businessman. It's revealed Mr. Plutonium here is the one organising the mass abductions and that he's selling the women on to the highest bidder. Our businessman is trying to buy as many as Plutonium can provide, but he needs more, and quickly. Back in the city, John lays a rose at the site of Nita's death, and we're introduced to a young kid who's being harassed by some gang members into giving them all his money. The kid says he doesn't have any, but promises to bring some the next day, so they let him go. Next, we see John on a ferry as he slowly begins to dump Nita's belongings overboard as part of an at-sea burial. He can't quite bring himself to get rid of the ashes, though. Having been dropped off by the ferry, John heads to a nearby waterfront to try again to dispose of the ashes, but there's a group of gang members mulling about, and I'm going to be honest with you here, they look like rejects from a Godfrey Ho adaptation of The Warriors, who are fighting with each other. They notice John quietly holding the urn and decide he's a prime candidate for some terrorising. They go over and start trying to cause trouble, and it's revealed that John actually has super awesome ninja skills, and he promptly kicks all their asses with little to no issue. After the incident, he decides he needs answers, so he heads over to the police department to see what's being done, and the detective in charge of his case is super unhelpful, basically saying that they're overworked and that it's in hand without really going into any specific details. John isn't happy with this and storms off ranting about why no one's helping. On arriving home, he opens one of the presents that Nita got him, and it's 2 ceremonial katanas. He runs his hands over the blades and cuts himself, and knows what he needs to do. The next day, down by the waterfront, another woman is in the process of being abducted when John appears in full ninja garb, launches half a dozen throwing stars at the gang and saves the woman. Later that night, John and his friends tail one of the gangs around the city trying to find out what they're up to, while our shady Plutonium Killer seems to get really hands-on with some actual radioactive material. And what follows is a string of montages where various gangs cause trouble only to be thwarted by the New York Ninja. He begins to gain a bit of a reputation for himself, to the point that the owner of the local paper and TV station decides to go all in on New York Ninja merch. T-shirts, posters, stickers, bags, the works. Things take a downward turn, however, when one of the ninja's encounters goes a bit awry. He's reunited with the young kid from the beginning who's been tracked down by the gangs who want their money. John intervenes as the ninja but ends up getting shot. When the gang try to head over to finish the job, the kid jumps in front of the bullet and in the commotion sends the cops scrambling. John manages to wake up and drags the kid back to his house, where over several weeks the pair heal up and grow a tremendous friendship for each other. And it's here really that we approach our final act. As the plutonium killer begins getting hands-on in his abductions, burning women to death with his radioactive hands, and attention turns to John's friends who are continuing to tail and report on the gangs, a final confrontation between the New York Ninja and the plutonium killer seems all but inevitable. In a show-stopping finale, will the New York Ninja save the day? Will the journalists get the scoop they're looking for? And hey, where can I get some of that sweet, sweet New York Ninja merch? All this and more will be answered if you check out New York Ninja. And given the journey this film went on to arrive at its 2021 release date, I'm actually really quite impressed with how it's all turned out. Obviously, with both the script and the shooting script long gone, they've had to rely on the visuals to help craft the narrative, but luckily this was a film that seemingly did a lot of showing over telling. Because not only is there a coherent script present here, but it's a fun one. The tone hits that wonderful sweet spot of being campy and light, but not afraid to throw a little darkness in there where needed. There's clean act structuring present for all three acts, which really helps break things up a little better. The characters are all developed enough, and what I mean by that is that they absolutely aren't one note, but they aren't particularly complex either. Which isn't necessarily a problem, as a lot of martial arts movies don't have particularly deep characters in them. In that sense, it's nice to see they do give all these characters something deeper than the basics. But there's also wiggle room here to maybe explore them just a little bit more. The dialogue is a near perfect recreation of the old 70s and 80s VO dub work for martial arts movies, but with a distinct charisma boost in place. It's a little silly at times, but it never goes too far in that direction. And a very tight leash has been kept on balancing the tone of the delivery as well. In fact, realistically, I only have two grievances with this film, and both of them are kind of circumstantial issues specific to this film's history. The first is that while there are clean act breaks, the pacing is a little bit all over the place. The first act opens incredibly strong, setting up the characters, the tone and the situations pretty damn well. It really manages to invest you in the drama and the action that's about to unfold. The second act maintains that momentum and ups the ante a little bit as the ninja makes his debut and you get some very well handled fight scenes, but things start to go a bit sideways around the second half of the second act, where it starts to basically become just a bit of a montage of fight scene after fight scene, which is a bit repetitive and slows things down a little bit. Then for the start of the third act, they shake things up and go heavy on the dialogue, as Ninja and his detective buddy decide to put aside the differences to find out what the plutonium killer is up to. Which fills about 15 to 20 minutes of the film with lengthy exposition, recurring shots of people just wandering around scrubland and old warehouses, and things seem to stall for time for a bit. It does manage to find its thread again for the final 10 to 15 minutes, which is ultimately what pulled me back in. But because the actual grand finale scene wasn't shot, they've had to cobble together an ending using digital effects and B-roll. It works. If anything, it's very true to form for movies of this time. But using CG in that way for a film this early was a little jarring. I guess what I'm saying is it opens and ends very strongly, but the second half of the second act and the first half of the third act could have lost about 15 minutes and it really would have helped to take it up to the next level. The other issue I have is a bit more nebulous, but it's around hype. Because this film was marketed as long, unfinished, crazy ninja film, completed and released with heavy celebrity endorsement. It's been churning around in my brain since I started thinking about reviewing this film, whether it would have been held in any kind of regard had it actually been released in 84 or 85. Trying to remove that mystic, mythic element at play here is quite difficult, and who's to say if this would have done well or not? But my gut's telling me that had this film come out at the time, it would have almost certainly have had a more sneering audience attached to it and would have likely been best of the worst fodder for red letter media. I still wholeheartedly believe Vinegar Syndrome would have released this film regardless of when it came out. It's got that vibe. But I think levying a lot of the USP of this title on "no one knew it existed for 35 years, it was unfinished, till now," has kind of set it to target a very specific subsection of the cult film market, which has kind of granted it a bit of immunity from ridicule from some subsections of the film enthusiast community. Like, I enjoyed this movie, don't get me wrong, but I've seen people describe it in the same way some describe The Second Coming of Christ, and it just isn't that. It's a goofy movie about a roller skating ninja fighting a man who needs radiation to not turn into a melty man, and it's okay for the movie to just be that. But by establishing hype, I do think some people have bought into the idea that this film is better than it is. So back in 1984, New York Ninja was directed and written by star of the film, John Liu. He has 4 writing and directing credits, and this was his last time in doing so, with his last finished film being in 1982. John only helped to adapt the script though. The original script was written by Arthur Schweitzer. It was his only writing credit, and when the film didn't get made, he eventually lost track of his copy of the script. Curtis picked the project up in 2018. He has 12 writing and directing credits under his belt. He's also a very experienced editor, with a long history working in shorts. When assembling Ninja, he reached out to both John and Arthur. The former, now retired and living in Taiwan, basically didn't want anything to do with the project, as far as I can read, with a blessing amounting to do what you want with it. And on contacting the latter, it was revealed that no production record survived for the film. This is also Curtis's last released credit to date. On the direction front, it's a bit of a mixed bag. Right off the bat, I can tell you it's not bad, but it is a bit of a series of peaks and troughs. Most of the more conversational sequences are quite bland. Not bad, but just lacking any kind of real flair. It feels like John just shot them as easily as possible to get them out of the way. Which is fine, but it's a little dry. There isn't much creative wow factor here. The more dramatic moments do have a bit more going on. It feels like there was a bit more attention to detail in an attempt to really try to set the scene and create an atmosphere. The crew in these moments were clearly very engaged in getting the best they could out of the production, and it really shows. But for me, easily the best of this film is found in its fight choreography and action direction. John by this time had been part of the martial arts industry for decades and had been in films for over a decade working with some of the greats. He knew his stuff and he knew how to get the best out of his cast. We have soft-touch, massed contact fight scenes here that are expertly executed, decently composed scenes that, while not mind-blowingly complex, are just very sturdy and do what they need to do. There's plenty of experimentation with the fight scenes, including a rock-solid swordplay sequence in the final act and some very interesting work in high jumps, leaps, and utilising the locations to their fullest ability. I loved it. The same can't be said though for the direction of the cast, which was fine, but did lean occasionally into unintentionally funny territory. From what I could see, it looks like John explained what he needed from the cast, as they do have marks, they do use props effectively, and they do work with the dialogue as best they can, but I feel like there was a keenness to just get what was needed to be got in the can and then move on. There were several scenes where the physical performances just weren't that great, but not in a way that it was the casting's fault, in a way where they probably should have done a second take but didn't. It's a skill that I could see the potential in the developing of, but as this was John's last direction credit, I guess it just wasn't to be. As for the Cine, it's good. Again, rock solid work with some decent compositional choices enhanced by Curtis. It has some very memorable shots, works excellently with colour, scenes are reasonably well blocked, the line is followed mostly. Honestly, the biggest difficulty I have with this thing is just that what survived is all there is. Like, had the budget been there, I'm certain there would have been reshoots or more B-roll captured. What's here was more than enough to put together a solid picture, clearly, but I just feel like it needed that final push of polish to really get it over the line and into something truly special. As it stands, it's really good, but just short of notable. And I'll keep it short, the editing is phenomenal. Curtis is a natural here and has done frankly tremendous work in reassembling this. Cuts are precise, he's got a clear understanding of how these older films were cut together, he understands the art of matching that pace and vibe of those early 80s action films, and he delivers a near perfect piece, which is especially amazing considering what he had to work with. In fact, other than the pacing issues I mentioned earlier, I'd say it was pretty faultless. Performance-wise, well, it's a game of two halves really. The on-screen physical cast are pretty much what you'd expect from an early 80s action film. The cast are lively, swing between being a little bit over the top and full-on hamtastic. The unfortunate side effect of all of the production records going missing is that we only actually know a handful of the on-screen cast. John Liu as the titular New York Ninja is a fantastic leading man here, energetic, charismatic and a little eccentric in places. This feels very much like a personal project, something he really believed in, and it shows in the footage captured. I think he's fantastic. and I think the film would be a much poorer watch without him in the lead. As for the voice cast, as mentioned, they kind of nailed the brief. It's a who's who of cult cinema. Of note, Don Wilson's take on John is a solid enough performance. The issue I have with it is, to my ears, he sounds eerily similar to Jonah Ray of MST3K fame, which added a whole new dimension to the film for me. Michael Berryman was a genuine surprise as the plutonium killer, and he's wonderful, really nailing the malevolent and unearthly presence that was required for the role. Having seen him in a few films playing a variety of roles, I honestly didn't even recognise his voice here, and was stunned when he popped up. He's amazing in this, really. Linnea Quigley as John's friend Randy was superb too, giving a somewhat bubbly but well-rounded performance. She really helped to bring the character to life, with a performance that sounded a touch stereotypical without getting too grating. And finally, the soundtrack, and it's perfect. Voyager 3 here have absolutely nailed the brief in delivering a score that feels exactly of the time. In fact, had they said that the only other thing to have survived production-wise was this as an unreleased score, I'd have believed it. It's poppy, rocky, synthy goodness, and not a day goes by without me regretting not grabbing the vinyl of this when I had the chance. In fact, the only thing I can say about both the score and the voice work is that it's a little over-clean for me. I think it probably would have helped sell it a bit more as a realistic score if they'd thrown just a little more sparkle in there, maybe a little warble, made it sound a little warm or a touch hotter, just something to help bring a bit more of an analogue feel to proceedings. New York Ninja was released as a luxurious 2-disc Blu-ray box set from Vinegar Syndrome in 2021. The picture quality is wonderful, it sounds great, and it's rammed with extra features about the making of the movie. The limited edition set also comes with a nice book which talks about the production, recovery and rebuilding of this film. It was Vinegar Syndrome's first independent release, and as a starter, it's superb. At the time of recording, the deluxe hardbox edition is out of print, but there's approximately 700 copies of the standard edition still in stock, and I would highly advise grabbing it at your next convenience, because when it's gone, it's gone. New York Ninja genuinely surprised me. I went in with fairly low expectations. Generally speaking, unfinished films are unfinished for a reason, but what's presented here is a very well edited, well directed and well presented picture with a fun script and a killer soundtrack. While it does wobble a little bit due to the occasional pacing issues here and there and the lack of reshoots and FX shots, to add a final layer of polish is a bit of a shame, I feel like these only further add to the charm. I can happily recommend New York Ninja if you enjoy goofy US action films or the martial arts genre. This'll pretty much cover you on both fronts and is definitely worth your time.